If your crafty stash is like mine, then you don't have Halloween themed stamp sets, but I'm not worried because I have 3 modern ways to stretch your Altenew stash. No pumpkins, witches' hats, or zombies for my card themes. Keep watching to find out what I chose instead. For my first perfect pairing, and for all of these perfect pairings, I'm going to experiment with unconventional color palettes. Usually when I think of Halloween, I think of oranges and purples and blacks. But for this first card, I'm going to make a sort of interesting themed Halloween card. So this is the October 2021 Paint a Flower Rosa Floribunda. And I'm also going to pair it with a newer item from October as well. This is the Mini Delight birthday banner. And so this bundle comes with both the die and the stamp set. And hopefully in your crafty stash you have a letter die set. This is the fine alphabet die set, and letter die sets are completely versatile in your stash. And I think they're a definite must-have because you can make a variety of short sentiments. The first thing I'm going to do is take the main image and paint a flower Rosa Floribunda and a piece of heavyweight black cardstock, and I'm going to gold heat emboss this image on here. And once I have this image gold heat embossed, I'm going to take a coordinating pigment ink. This is the Altenew Antique Gold Pigment ink, as well as the smallest brush out of the Altenew detail blending brushes. And I'll use this brush to add little gold tipped petals. And I'll use the number 5 blending brush to add gold details to the tips of the petals with the pigment ink. For painting this image with the pigment ink, I don't need a lot of the ink on my brush. I'm sort of just tapping the very tip of the angled brush to my ink pad. And I'm just trying to deposit the color right at the edge of the petal. And if I have too much, I can always wipe a little bit of that pigment ink off my brush and start over. I'll keep applying the gold highlights around my flower cluster until I've filled in all 3 flowers with the antique gold pigment ink. Once I feel like I've added enough gold highlights to my flower, I'll let this dry back and work on the background element to this card. With another piece of black cardstock, I'll use this as my background that I'll adhere to my folded note card base. I'll use a coordinating gold metallic watercolor. This is Gold Pearl from the metallic watercolor pan set. I'll apply a very generous helping of gold splatters throughout my background panel for a very haunting aura to this card. And once I've applied enough splatter, I'll set this one aside as well to dry. On an offcut of the same black cardstock that I've been using this whole time, I'm going to prepare my sentiment banner. In the Mini Delight birthday banner, I'll take this image and this one here, and I will use the same gold embossing powder as earlier to stamp these images. In order to complete the Mini Delight birthday banner zigzag look, you need to stamp one of the images twice. To get a little creative with my sentiment, I am going to use part of the sentiment from Paint a Flower Rosa Floribunda, and that is this For My Beautiful sentiment right here. And I'm going to stamp this within my sentiment banner. So this is what I have for my sentiment banner so far. I white heat embossed the For My Beautiful portion of my sentiment. And now this is where the fine alphabet dies are going to come into play. So what I've done is I've taken the letters B and O. I've spelled boo. And now my complete sentiment is For My Beautiful Boo. And I find that suitable for Halloween. And sometimes you just have to get creative with what's in your stash. So now comes the assembly portion of this card. I'll set this boo aside and use the coordinating die from Mini Delight birthday banner to cut the main banner out. And these 2 images are really easy to fussy cut, so I'll do that. To assemble my little banner here, when I fussy cut these 2 images, I left a little ledge right here, just so that I have a place to glue my banner to this folded portion. So I'll go ahead and do that. So now I have all the elements to my card Here's my little banner. The word boo. I also went ahead and fussy cut the rose image from earlier. And I also adhered my gold splatter background to my folded note card base. So assembling this is going to be really easy. I'm going to go for this arrangement here. So first up, I'm going to foam mount my floral cluster using the Altenew dimensional foam tape. So after foam mounting the sentiment banner and gluing down my little boo sentiment here, I'll add just a few embellishments. I'll use a few of the white dots from the Essential Black and White enamel dot set. And after adding the enamel dots to my card front, this finishes my first perfect pairing. I've got Paint a Flower Rosa Floribunda, the Mini Delight birthday banner stamp set and die set, and also the older fine alphabet die set. I got a lot of feedback on this card right here using one of the new stencils from October 2021. But instead of replicating this card exactly, I'll show you a way to change up the occasion instead of a happy birthday sentiment. For this card, I used the Shattered Cubes Builder Stencil set, and there are many different ways to combine these stencils for a variety of different looks. For my card, I'm going to use this iteration here. And just to let you know, for this card, I used this iteration, so I used both stencils 4 times and did a gradient from this corner down to this corner in Roy G. Biv order, so red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and purple. I'm going to lay down the Altenew silicone stamping mat just to protect my filming surface. And then I'm going to lay down a panel of 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 white cardstock. I'm going to pick a jewel-toned selection of inks. So this top one is Cool Summer Night, followed by Rose Petal, and then Cherry Blossom mini ink cube sets. I have my selection of ink blending tools. These are the large size, and I have them labeled for each color family. Starting with a light wash of sea glass, and I'll work that a little bit more than 1/3 of the way down my cardstock panel. Then I'll work in rose quartz in the middle 1/3 of my panel, and then finally pink diamond on the bottom 1/3 of my panel. I put down a little bit of washi tape just to make sure that my paper doesn't move while I'm ink blending for these next steps. Before I grab my stencils, I'm going to make a little pencil mark for the center of my panel. And I can easily do this by making an X from each corner. And where those 2 lines intersect is where the center of my cardstock panel is. So I'm not going to make this too dark. It probably won't show up on camera, but I can see where my center is. And now I can align the X that's etched into the stencil and align it to my center point on my cardstock panel. And once I'm happy with that alignment, I'll apply another piece of washi tape. And now the organization of my inks is deliberate. I'm going to work down the layers of each gradient on my cardstock here. So still following the same gradient, I'm going to apply the next darkest shade in Cool Summer Night and apply it just to the top 1/3 where my blue layer is. Then I'll repeat that. This is the next darkest ink in Rose Petal, so that's Puffy Heart. And I'll apply that in the center of my cardstock. Then finally Pinkalicious on the bottom 1/3 of this panel. Okay, that looks good. The next step, according to the instructions, is to rotate this 180. So that's what I'm going to do. And I'm aligning this again to the X in the center of my cardstock. And once I'm happy with that alignment, I'll move on to the 3rd darkest color in each family of ink. Again, working from top to bottom. So that's the end of the first stencil. Then I'll move on to the second one. Now before I go to the darkest colors in my inks, I'll do a tone on tone effect. So I'll go back to my lightest colors for this first layer of the second stencil. So there's that layer. And then all I've got to do is rotate it 180, align the etched X, and also other key areas on my stencil. And now I will use my darkest color from each of the 3 families of inks that I've selected. So that's Desert Night, Cosmic Berry, and Razzleberry. All right, here's the moment of truth. Great. So this looks pretty good to me. I do have some slight areas of misalignment, and that's okay because there are definitely easy ways to fix this. With the residual ink that is sitting on my silicone stamping mat, I'll apply little drops of water to those areas, and then I can use a water brush to resuspend this ink and add little splatters throughout my panel, and this will help hide a little bit of the mistakes just by creating some asymmetry throughout my cardstock panel. So I will set this panel aside and work on the next elements of my card. I deliberately chose jewel tones for this card as I thought it would go for my sort of witchy crystal vibe. So to help enforce that scene, I have the Geometric Elements stamp set and its coordinating dies. And I'll just use the images that sort of replicate crystals, so this diamond, this taller one, and this one here. And I will white heat emboss these 3 images onto some vellum. Once I have my 3 crystals, I'll set this aside with my geometric background panel and work on the next element to my card. I'm going to use a few of the images from the Way Too Sweet stamp and die bundle. And from the stamp set, I'll use these 2 wrapped candy images, as well as this large sentiment here. So here are my elements to this card. I have my geometric background with a sort of a crystalline pattern, my 3 vellum crystals, and then my metallic elements from Way Too Sweet stamp and die set. I added my background panel to my folded note card base. And then to the back of my sentiment banner, I've added a few pieces of the foam tape, Instant Dimension foam tape. And before I take this to my folded note card base with my background, I'm going to use the adhesive to glue down my crystals. So I'm going to pick an arrangement for my card front and use that adhesive to hold down my vellum element so I don't have to apply adhesive to my vellum. There we go, I think that looks good. And then I will apply another layer of foam and then use the Silky Lilac metallic thread to create a circular element on this geometric background. And since the adhesive is exposed, I can just drop that metallic thread onto it and then press this whole embellishment to my card front. And we'll also foam mount my candy pieces to frame my sentiment. And then as a final touch, I'll add a few of the enamel dots to my background. And after adding in those embellishments, that finishes this whimsical, witchy, geometric, crystalline Halloween themed card with a lot of jewel tones and definitely your non-conventional Halloween color palette. To continue the modern Halloween from the previous card with jewel tones, I'll go to the more earth tones with this next card. First I'll start with Cool Doodles, one-of-a-kind 3D embossing folder. And then I'll use a panel of spicy yogurt cardstock as my base for this background. I am picking an orientation for my background piece here. I'm going to keep it pretty simple. So I'll run this through my die cutting machine following the instructions for embossing folders. I will use the deboss side. So that's the side without the text. So this is the one that's pressing into the cardstock. And now that my design is locked into place, You see I can't really shift this around. I will use a mixed media ink. This is Evergreen. And run my ink pad just along the high points of the deboss side of my embossing folder. We'll fold this back over, and then again I will run this through my die cutting machine. And I'm happy with the impression that this embossing folder has left on my cardstock, so I will put this off to the side for a second. Now, I love splatters, so I'm going to add coordinating ink splatters all over this cardstock panel. And I can use the mixed media ink to get an exact match. So I'll dispense a little bit onto an acrylic block, and then I can use a water brush to add splatter all over my background. And I'm happy with this look now, so I'll set this off to the side while I work on the next element to my card. To coordinate with the Cool Doodles 3D embossing folder, I picked the Love You So Much stamp and die bundle. This is a much older stamp set on the Altenew store, and I thought the stamp set coordinated well with the running theme of alchemy and potion making for my Halloween themed cards. I'm going to use scraps of white cardstock in my stash to stamp some of these images. I am picking images from the Love You So Much stamp set that replicate the Amantia muscaria color palette, so that's the red mushroom with the white speckles on the cap. I'll start with a layer of canyon clay, and then without removing the stamp, I'll rub burnt red just on the top. I will do this one more time with the smaller image, but this time I'll start with Pastel Sunrise, and then just do the top of the cap with canyon clay. So I die cut my 3 toadstool caps, as well as 3 of the stems included in the die set, and I cut those from scrap pieces of black cardstock. I also trimmed down my 3D embossed panel to a little less than 3 3/4 by 5 inches, and I also ripped this top part here for a deckled edge and added it to my note card base. And then I will start assembling my toadstools. I black heat embossed one of the sentiments in Love You So Much after assembling the little toadstools. And I used a matte liquid adhesive to adhere my toadstools to my sentiment banner. I applied a few pieces of the dimensional foam tape behind the toadstools, and I will use the foam tape to anchor all my elements, as well as the sentiment. And as a final element and embellishment, I'll use the hearts in the Essential Black and White Enamel Dot set. And so I used the Cool Doodles 3D embossing folder and the Love You So Much 4x6 stamp and die bundle to create this card inspired by alchemy and potions, but with a modern twist to it. My series encourages you to shop your existing Altenew stash and rekindle their love with newer releases. Perfect Pairings with Jaycee airs on the Altenew channel every second and fourth Sunday of the month. Please make sure you like and subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you so much for tuning in to this perfect pairing episode with me, and I'll see you in the next one.
Hello crafters, Jen here. For more tips, techniques, tutorials, and to discover which paper crafting products are right for you, subscribe to Altenew's YouTube channel. Make sure to hit the notification bell so you don't miss any videos. Thanks for watching.